All right. Good evening. We're live, I guess. It's incredibly loud. I hit the live button before I was ready. But, as is always the case, I am never prepared for these things. Anyway, so be it. Obviously, for everyone who is not, well, everyone who's in the States, that's probably the easiest way to say it. Happy Thanksgiving. As it is, we are here for the 47th week of me doing music in Russia here in 2025. And yeah, this week is, I don't know, it's a pretty good one all around. We got 12 releases. We have pretty much every single genre. Well, the four that I normally talk about, right? And honestly, as has been the case in the last period of time, things are pretty solid all the way around. We are going to be opening with electronic music, which I feel like we haven't seen in a while. So it's kind of nice that it's making a reappearance. Obviously, in the last few weeks, there has been a lack of electronic music and rock and metal. And that is partly my fault, simply because I just have not been listening to as much of it. But it's also just simply because there has been less of it being released in the last period of time. Now, that said, there have been some releases since the start of the month, to be sure. I realize that we are at the end of the month right now, so, but there have been some releases in electronic music and metal since the start of the month. Partly, I just didn't get around to it because there were some other major releases that I felt were more pertinent, especially in the genres that I have massively been covering this month, which is rap and hip hop and pop and indie music. But then also, at the same time, in terms of like big releases or interesting releases in those various genres, it has also been a little bit dry. So it's partly my fault that I haven't been covering electronic and rock and metal as much, but it's also kind of just the release window, the release schedule as it is right now. Let me go ahead and get one thing open here. This is not connected to music, but seeing as I am an American and seeing as how today is Thanksgiving in the States, and obviously I did not cook a turkey because that is insane. It is possible to do so in Russia now. I remember like for the first 7 years at least after I moved here, it was damn near impossible to find a turkey. It was one of those things where there was one American individual, John. This is story time right now before we get to music. So if you are watching this not as a live stream, but later in the future, you can just skip ahead to the music part if you're interested in that. Otherwise, if you're here for the stream, just stick around for story time. I remember this guy, John, would special order a turkey from a farmer. That was pretty much the only way to find it. Now, you can find turkeys pretty much anywhere. That's beside the point. I am going to be having a mushroom flavored beer because I figured I'll have a beverage while we're doing the music stream, and mushrooms are food, so that kind of works. I don't know, whatever the logic sticks, that's what we're going with. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and get us over to the first release. And kind of like that. Now let me make sure I got my notes open here. And yep, we're all good. Okay. So starting us out here at the very top or the very bottom, I don't know, whatever. This is nyan.pop. That's the name of the album. And the artist is nyan.mp3. So this is a, well, let me start that again. A mysterious young artist who uses a digital cat avatar feels like it should be a warning that whatever we're going to listen to is going to be completely garbage. But that's not the case. This is hyperpop, which straddles the line of mass adoption electropop. I'm putting it in the electronic category simply because the pop and indie category is pretty heavy. It's been pretty heavy for the last month at this point in time. And this really does feel like it is very, very close to the electropop category. So I'm going to put it in the electronic release just to kind of, it's an EP too. So it's kind of light. It's a nice way to get us started out here. This is the artist's first small release. I'm not really going to call it an album because it is 11 minutes long. I get it has 8 tracks. But, I mean, if this was a grindcore band and they had, like 30 tracks and it was also 15 minutes long, maybe I would consider it. It's like 30 tracks. But anyway, regardless. What I will say is I really enjoyed this. And I do hope that Nyan.pop can, first of all, make his tracks a little bit longer in the future, right? Mature and grow as an individual and work on I gotta stop moving my hand like that. Work on extending the length of his tracks. But this is actually, I don't know, if he can make a full-length album, something that is, say, 30 to 40 minutes long minimum with tracks that are basically double what they are right now, then it will be a very, very solid album. Because as it is, this is kind of infectious. So. I mean, this realistically is more of the hyperpop category, if you will, or internet pop or whatever. So, obviously, like, the sort of internet sound, the electronic sound is laced throughout here. There's no escaping it. There's something here. It's still a little bit undercooked. Not in the sense of the ideas are inherently bad. It's just, like I said, they need to be developed a little bit more. Given a little bit more room to breathe, right? Like, there are musical ideas on these tracks that are good and fun and things that you want to hear more of, but, like, let's be real, a minute 17, that is, no, it's McKinsey. I will check out Jewish Marmelade at the end, all right? I will hit it up then. That's kind of how we do things around here with requests. But yeah, I will definitely for sure do that. So yeah, like with nyan.pop, the album by nyan.mp3, I think there's a lot of good stuff happening here. I just really think that the major problem is it feels like this designed for TikTok in terms of song length. And while that's a good thing if you want to like probably get discovered via TikTok or other short form internet content, in the long term, I would hope as an artist that you're interested in kind of expanding those ideas. So I really enjoyed this. This is a very short listen, but it is very, like I said, it's very infectious. It's kind of fun. I had a good time with it. And it is easy to listen to multiple times. So even though the tracks are short, if you have this on repeat, they do come up pretty frequently. So, all right, moving along to the other release that we have in the electronic category. This is Levandowskiy, and this is the album Luxury Grooves Volume 1. Now, Levandowskiy is not necessarily an electronic musician, at least from the start. He has some connections to the Russian hip-hop community, as I understand. Also the Russian pop community. I don't know exactly. I've seen his name before, and I actually ran into a few of his singles earlier this year, late last year, because I had them already favorited in I'll think about that with the John Garrick thing. With Levandowskiy here, I'm looking at this specifically as an electronic album because this is kind of my first full-on dive into him. And the name of the album is Luxury Grooves, and everywhere that there was discussion of this album, people were writing things like super stylish Afro electro house. It's all focused on the nicer things in life, luxury, things like that. And it sounds super luxurious. Honestly, that is basically what this is. It's just a really good electronic techno release. It would sound equally good in like a big nightclub, or if you just had like a house party and that was the atmosphere that you were going for, or realistically it was some big field in an open air situation too. This would be a good soundtrack for that. So this is, it's actually like, again, it's a type of electronic music and techno that I know people are making this music out there, but it's just one of those things that I don't run into very often. So I don't know. It kind of, again, as often happens when I'm doing these weekly roundups, this album scratched a musical itch I didn't really know that I had.
Your body chips reaching deep. We don't have breaks, we feel free. We taking road to best trip. Mercedes. I call you Mercedes. Drive me, I'll drive you. Mercedes.
Like, again, you could imagine this at a massive outdoor festival. You could also imagine this in a club. That's kind of the energy throughout this whole thing. As is often the case with electronic music, and to that degree, or by that same merit, rock and metal, because there are so many specific subgenres, people who are really die hard about one sound or another are going to be, I don't know, like maybe turned off by this. I think by and large, for people who are just open to the like overall like techno electronic sound, this is probably going to, I don't know, like be a worthwhile listen. Very atmospheric, but the vocals really do give it that kind of, I don't know. On the one hand, sensuousness, but on the other hand, there is that luxury groove aspect to all of it. So, and we'll hit the second track here real fast.
Club going louder. Shots flying in the bottom. Glow sticks, lights and color.
Like, it's no Fred again,
Everybody
but
feeling proud of.
there were moments on this album where I caught glimpses of that same energy, which... So that is the album Luxury Grooves Volume 1. The artist is Levandowskiy. And that's going to do it for electronic music. I know it's been a long time since we've had electronic music in the sort of lineup. But even though it's back, it's not here for very long. So maybe December will be an electronic month. Or maybe that's just the end of the year. Moving on to rock and metal. We're going to start with an EP here. This is one that came out at the start of the month, November 6th, that I realistically should have featured before, but it was also in a situation because it's a 3-song EP, and I had a lot of weeks where there was no other rock and metal for me to discuss. I just kind of let it simmer. This is the group Grimed, and this is the EP Очищение. Now, Grimed is... not a super group, but it's a group that is formed of members of other Russian rock and metal groups, including somebody, I guess, who used to be in Slaughter to Prevail, which is a group that we talked about back in, I believe, April. Kind of a big deal, kind of in the States right now as well, too. Very short, 8 minutes, 3 tracks, but it's really groovy, metallic hardcore, and... while this isn't necessarily the hardest thing this week, it is vying for first place in that regard. So just prep yourself in that regard. If you know the genre, you might feel the groove a little bit. If this is not your genre, you will not recognize the groove as much. But I mean, it's still got the hardcore sound at the core, so. Just funny, right? This has 3 tracks, it's 8 minutes long. The Nyan MP3 album had 8 tracks and was 11 minutes long. Get the idea. I mean, I had a great time with it, and I think if you know the sound, if it's sound you like, then you'll probably also have a great time with it. If it's not, then I will not subject you to it any further. That is the EP Очищение. The group is Grimed, And I don't know if this is their first EP or not, but it'll, I hope that we'll have a full length from them coming next year. Now, moving on, we have the album Liminal by the group City of the Lost. And City of the Lost is a group that I talked about back in September. And they shared, back in September, we were talking about their second album of the year. The first one they actually released back in May. It was Luminar. They all begin with an L. Luminar is one of them. Laminar or something is another one. And then Liminal here is the final one. When I talked about it back in September, I said it was a really good mix of spacious, slow burn, cinematic post-rock with the bombastic intensity of post-metal. And that is the same thing here. There's a storyline that these three albums are telling all together. And this is the final part of that release. I don't know. These guys did a tour in China earlier this year because as Russian artists, it's kind of hard to do tours abroad in general right now for obvious reasons. Just a very, very good post-release, post-rock, post-metal, whatever you want to think of. This definitely leans more post-rock, but there are moments that are more post-metal, just in the fact that they go a little bit heavier in that regard. And it feels like it is a fitting end to this trilogy of albums. They released 3 full-length albums this year. Not even this year, from, I think the first one was it was in May to November. So basically in half a year, they released 3 full-length albums. So effectively, it's one album that they just had to split up for mastering purposes. I think, realistically, that you could probably just put these 3 albums on back to back to back, and it would just go down very, very smoothly. I do need to go back and listen to the first album. I still have not heard it, but yeah, this is a great album. If you like post-rock, if you like instrumental rock, especially things that lean a bit more atmospheric and cinematic at times, then you will probably enjoy this album. And again, just so we're clear, this is the album Liminal. The group is City of the Lost. I'm starting with this track because it's kind of an outlier on the album. It's a little bit different. But it does get into the sound that we're more familiar with. It just has like that weird little goofy start. The spacious sound that I was referring to earlier. But still, it's got a melody, right? The type of thing that you could hum or whistle later on if you get it stuck in your head. I'm going to jump back to the first track, though, because the first track really has that cinematic aspect to it. And honestly, this is the post-rock sound that, not to say that first introduced me to the concept of post-rock, but it's the one that I probably consumed most heavily when I first started listening to post-rock. That sort of just, I don't know, it feels like looking at the summer night sky type of music. The grappling with the questions of growing up as a late adolescent type music. That's how this album starts, but it doesn't stay there, and I do appreciate that. It starts with this very introspective track, but then from there, it just jumps right into it, right? It lets that behind, which is I think on the one hand, it sets the tone going into the album, but then it doesn't keep you brooding for very long, unless you move on. And overall, it's a very upbeat album. I feel like my computer is lagging, which is super cool. Yeah, last track is theoretically it's the final track of a trilogy of albums, so it's supposed to end probably pretty epically. Also begins with a lot of sort of cinematic atmospheric canoodling going on. But this is where we get into like the sort of Russian Circles-esque post-metal bit where it gets a little bit heavier. So yeah, if you like instrumental music, and I think part of the reason I mentioned cinematic aspect to the music, and I think the thing with post rock and post metal and stuff like that is, in general, instrumental music. It's the same reason I think that people enjoy techno, especially a lot of that dubstep or grime type of UK garage sound, which is that when there are no lyrics and it's just mood and atmosphere, you can use it as the soundtrack to your life, to whatever's happening. And this is an album that fits that, but it's very dynamic. It's kind of got a little bit going on for really any day of the week, if you want to think of it like that. If you take all three albums that City of the Lost put out this year as sort of one extended release, then you're set for pretty much, I think, anything that might run your way in this year or the coming year. But the final end of their trilogy here in 2025. This is the album Liminal by City of the Lost. It's kind of an album that I think realistically anyone would enjoy or find moments on. So now, this is actually a compilation album. So it's various artists is how I have it labeled on there. This is from the label Mертвых собак. And there's actually a group that I follow on Vkontakte and in Telegram, Мертвых собак lie, which is like the cry of dead dogs or something like that. Don't ask me to translate it right now. I'm not thinking about it like that. And this is their album Враг, отражении, which is the enemy and the reflection. When I was in high school, which is ages ago at this point in time, but doesn't seem that long ago, right? But that's always how it works. Anyway, when I was in high school, it was super common for groups to send out promo releases. In fact, I remember I had a friend who used to sign up and get these little cassette tapes that would have 2 or 3 songs on them, typically 2, one on each side, promo releases you go around. And then as CDs became a little bit more common or easier to mass produce with burners, they would start sending off discs. And around that same period of time, which would have been like late 90s, early 2000s, the compilation CD started to become very, very popular. And I don't mean compilation CD in the sense of like, now that's what I call music volume 8000, right? Which is probably still happening. I don't know. Maybe in the age of Spotify, it doesn't exist anymore. I just remember I've mentioned Punkorama many, many times when talking about punk music in the rock and metal category here. And I think Punkorama is a really good example. Punkorama was Epitaph Records' compilation albums where each of the artists on the roster of the label would put out a song. Sometimes they would just take a song from one of the albums that they had. Sometimes they would record a completely new song. But it was a way for the album label to advertise the groups that were on it, and people would just buy those albums because you knew it was going to be a solid lineup of tunes. But then streaming services came along, and that practice kind of disappeared. And evidently, mертвых собак, that label is attempting to revive it. I don't know. Hopefully this is the first of many. This is the first compilation album for what is a kind of independent underground Russian, largely metalcore, hardcore community of artists. I'm going to take a quote from another contacted community, which is Blackwall, and their quote says, "In half an hour, you are able to study the entire map of Russian metalcore and hardcore, from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg, from Arkhangelsk to Rostov-on-the-Don." The groups here did not take these tracks from pre-existing releases. These are all original tracks specifically for this compilation. So listening to this, you are, even if you're familiar with all these groups, going to be hearing tracks that you have never heard before, which I think is a great idea in the first place. But by and large, you're probably going to be exposed to groups that you've never heard before. And I understand that in the age of streaming services, you can just hit like shuffle or get the algorithm curated playlist. But I have to imagine that a growing percentage of the populace is also great album artwork. I have to imagine that a growing percentage of the populace is going to be, over time, developing more and more pushback against the non-human curated music, right? And not only is this, in some regards, the antithesis of that, it's human curated. But the most important thing here, and this is, I think, something that hopefully we'll see more of in the future, we do see it a lot in the electronic community, there's no doubt about that. These types of compilations are a great way, too, for musicians to further strengthen their ties in the community, right? It's not huge, right? If you're in Vladivostok, you're probably not going to cross paths with somebody from Rostov-on-the-Don. Like, you're at opposite ends of the country, and this is a vast, vast country. Basically like somebody in Anchorage recording a track and somebody in Miami recording a track, right? At the same time, they become cognizant of each other, and in a way that maybe they weren't before the recording of this compilation. And maybe that causes them to start to communicate with each other. It's a way also for musicians to perhaps form a greater sense of community. And I think there's something really great about that. So I'm going to quit with the chatter. I'm going to hit a little bit here. The first half of this is a bit more metalcore. The second half of this, metalcore / new metalish. There's one track too that is kind of, I got a little bit of Deftones core. That's the third one. But and then the second half tends to be a bit more hardcore, underground type energy. But like I said, I will just let this play a little bit now. This is probably also the heaviest release. Got a little new metal energy here. I mean, again, I'm playing tracks off of the first half, which tends to be a bit more new metalcore. But just from the 3 tracks, you can already hear there is a little bit of variance even among the groups and the songs I've played thus far. So if you want to see what's happening in the Russian metal community, let me rephrase that. Mostly non-black metal Russian community. Black metal, you are going to see Shyvyak represented here, and Umoroz has a little bit more of the black metal sound. But if we ignore sort of the black metal end of things for the most part, this comp album is a very good starting point. It's a chance to check out. I mean, I've talked about Umoroz earlier this year. Deviant has put out like so many singles over the course of the year. I'm surprised they didn't put out a full length. Virgin Lunacy also put out lots, and I believe Shyvyak put out something. Anyway, this is a very good starting point if you want to get an idea of what's happening in kind of the like more underground or more independent Russian metal scene here in Russia, and just in general the label, the mертвых собак label. So yeah, this is various artists. This is a compilation, and the title of the album here on Yandex is "Мертвых собак label, враг отражении," or "Enemy in the Reflection," with the Medusa reference there. Really solid. But that's not it for rock and metal. And the final pick for rock and metal this week is one that might raise some eyebrows for various reasons, because we're going to be talking about the group Anacondaz. Anacondaz for a long time was kind of considered alt hip-hop, if you will. And before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit. This is a group that the Russian government effectively canceled. Again, remember, the Russian government is the one that cries all the time about Russian culture being canceled around the world. Oh, they're canceling our concerts, they're canceling our books, they're canceling this. They fucking do it so much better themselves here inside the country. Artists, writers, anybody who does not toe the line, that shit gets cut off immediately. And Anacondaz is a really good example of that. They didn't necessarily come out against the war or anything like that, but they said a few things. Maybe they did actually come out against it. I don't remember. It's been fucking years at this point. They had shows across the country canceled back in 2022. They were effectively canceled. Not openly. It was not an open call for cancellation. It's just they took a stance that the government did not approve of. And so in cities across the country where their concerts were supposed to be held, they just got canceled left and right for fire safety violations, for this, for that, right? Always some official reason. It wasn't them actually getting shut down by the government, but yeah. So 2022 was also the year that they released an album, and obviously when you're having your concerts canceled left and right, that's not great. So after 2022 and after the album, or it was 2021, but 2022 was when they were getting ready to do their whole album thing. I think the album came out in 20. It doesn't matter. Anyway, they went quiet for a while after that, and no one thought too much of it. I guess they released an album on one of their side projects, but nobody was expecting them to pop up here at the end of 2025 for the most part, with an album over an hour long, 17 tracks. It is their 8th album in total. The group's sound is what they call panzern rap or panzern rock. Which is kind of a play on southern rock or southern rap. It doesn't really matter. It's just a term that they came up with. The sound that they have on this album is pop, punk, and alt rock mixed with alternative hip hop. And yeah, it is the alternative hip hop thing used to be their bass sound. Here, it is still typically featured in the bridges of the song, but is no longer as prominent as it was on their early releases. I'm putting this here because I do think it is the best sort of rock release of the week, but it also serves as a nice bridge to the next genre, which is rap and hip hop, because there is a little bit of that here. And I'm transitioning wonderfully this evening. This here, though, and the reason that I love this album so much, 17 tracks, I would have thought that because a lot of this kind of feels the same, and I don't have any songs favorited for some reason. I had a lot of them, and for some reason Spotify just wiped all that information somehow. I don't know, it doesn't matter. This is the sound. If you're watching this and you're from Russia, then you will remember the music channel A1. A1 here in its original form, back before like 2012 or something like that, was the channel for like alternative rock. And it was the sound of music. This is the sound of like Russian music and just the scene here when I first moved here back in like 2009. This is like a time capsule of an album for me, but it still feels fresh in its own regard. Like, especially if you have not heard this before, it's going to sound probably familiar because there is a lot of like a pop punk and alt rock reference here. But and like I said, this is their 8th album. Anacondaz' first album came out in 2009, which is basically around the time that I moved here. So there is a lot of overlap here. Music's solid, vocals are great, lyrics feel snarky and rebellious in a teenage sort of way, but at the same time, they are surprisingly insightful and poignant. In fact, they're hella poignant at times. It's just a really good album, and the name of the album too is Ночь с астраханцем, which is a night with a person from Astrakhan, which is where the group is from. But I will go ahead. Also, the album artwork, I have no idea, but whatever. It's very Russian rock in its own way too, so this sound right here. If you're hearing this, you've never been to Russia, you've never really listened to Russian music before, this is going to sound maybe a little wild or unusual. But if you're from Russia, this is a very specific sound that you probably will recognize.
Мне на завод нельзя, везите в Олимпийский. Курьеру Яндекса малышки не покажут сиськи. Рэперу никогда не быть финансовым экспертом. Эскорт тоже мимо, этот род для рэпа. И будет оттепель, а после про нас снимут кино. Меня сыграет Райан Гослинг, озвучит Бурунов. За музыку забрать нам Оскар, увы, не суждено. Из плюсов только Райан Гослинг, а фильм будет говно. Но есть и хорошая сторона.
Like, the singing is unexpectedly good, right? It's pleasant. The lead singer has a very pleasant voice. The piano on this track too. I might be misinterpreting this track, but it's on the one hand kind of this idea about us being alone in the universe potentially, and everything sort of being on this one globe, but also this guy walking through a dark city and looking at all of the lighted windows in all of the apartment blocks and realizing that there's a little planet or a little universe within each of those windows as well, and kind of like looking into them and observing them as though from another planet, which is like probably not a concept which or a metaphor which is not unfamiliar to people who have lived in big cities like Moscow or Petersburg, or really just any large city where you see the mass of humanity around you. But it's such an unexpected little like reprieve in the middle, like at the start of the album. By and large, it is that pop, punk, alt rock. I kept thinking of Ben Folds a lot while listening to this album too, which is not a bad thing. There are a lot of digs too at the current situation in the country as well too. There's actually the reason Anacondaz are kind of a group that, not to say that people had forgotten about them, but people were reminded of not long ago, is there was a situation where the Russian government is now currently actively censoring all sorts of stuff. And one of their songs, which was kind of tongue-in-cheek, obviously, it was all like, Mama, I love Satan, Mama, I love narcotics, Mama, I love, like, whores. The Russian government basically, the streaming services, in order to avoid fines from the Russian government, edited out all of the bad words. So the song just became Mama, I love, Mama, I love, Mama, I love. And they even kind of reference that song on this album, so I don't know. A group which is realistically in their 16th year of existence, and who, not to say that they weren't relevant a few years back, but they kind of feel slightly more relevant now than they were in the past. I'll let it there. You get the idea. That is the group Anacondaz. That is the album Ночь с астраханцем. And I think that is the best rock/metal album of the week. So we're going to move on to rap and hip hop. Now, rap and hip hop this week is pretty far up the list. And it's not because this is necessarily a good week for rap and hip hop. There are only 2 releases. Rap and hip hop this week is acting as a transition. It's acting as a bridge. Our first album has a lot in common with rock and metal. And our next one has a lot in common with pop music. So the first one that we're going to be talking about here is Время, колокольчиков, which is like time of the bell ringers, or time of the bells ringing. It doesn't matter. Колокольчик is a bell, yeah. Anyway, the artist is Booker, and I got to talk a little bit. First of all, nice album artwork. The stamp here, for those of you who are not familiar, this was one of the sort of like if I remember correctly, anti-piracy measures that you used to be able to buy all sorts of pirated discs in underground crosswalks and markets in Russia for a very long time. And as one of the methods for fighting piracy, they would have these holographic little stickers on the disc. Now, not that that made any difference, because the people who pirated them would also buy them, but this is a nice little throwback era to a time when people actually used to buy albums here. Anyway, talking about this album online, I saw a lot of people talk about how the lyrics were just absolutely cringed. I didn't notice it. I'm going to be completely honest. And let's be real. In 2025, I thought that cringe is sometimes actually kind of cool if it's done intentionally, right? So, I don't know. Booker is a battle rapper out of St. Petersburg from the era, I guess, when battle rap actually used to be a thing. It is no longer. It used to be huge here. And it kind of fits because he sounds like an artifact from the rap rock era of the early 2000s. Now, the battle rap scene here in Russia is not from the early 2000s, but the sound here feels like an artifact, and the fact that he is from a previous era, if you will, in the Russian music scene in some ways. I mean, obviously, he's still making music, and he's not a very old artist, so I don't want to pretend like he's some dinosaur here, but the sound is old, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. This is a good sound. I really like the sound. There are newer elements to the sound, too, but it has the overall energy of the early 2000s, right? Lyrically, they say it's trying to encapsulate Russian culture in 2025. Does not really feel like that, as far as I can tell. I read the lyrics and I was just like, yeah, this doesn't, like, it's not as pointed or specifically calling out aspects of Russian culture like Anacondaz did on the last album. This is like, maybe there's one or two vague references to things that are happening currently in the country or the war, but for the most part, it's just sort of like pretty general. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. In that regard, lyrically, it is also kind of timeless, but it is maybe not what the artist necessarily was going for. Sound-wise, let's just get into it. In general, he has some pretty good lines too, right? Booker does.
Жизнь бьется в груди, как птица. Если таким, то надо родиться. Без отца, без надежд на завтра. Бесполезней, чем динозавры. Ведь наши тела в земле не сделают нефть, но сделают легче тем, кто еще здесь. Кэш нужен лишь, чтоб взрослеть. На все это нетрудно подсесть. Это фемдом, тут госпожа мести. Что искал ты, все у нас есть здесь. Нахуй клубы разбитых сердец. Мы не торчим, мы не платим за секс. Да, я не самый суровый на улице, но все серьезные с нами тусуются. Мисс Кузи, ваш эксклюзив мне не сунется. Зато как опухоль все образуется. Скоро 30, нихуя не фрешман.
This has a very early 2000s sound, right? When the rappers were trying to go with that metal sound and then, you know, like early Limp Bizkit.
Yeah. Я тот пистолет, что захуярил Джона Леннона. В магазине пуль хватит на каждое колено. Девочка, держи меня за спусковой крючок. Плюнул тебя в вечности, и я хочу еще. Не хочу быть автоматом, хочу самострелом из первого брата. Дулом у глазка, когда звонят в хату. Красным пятном после М110. Мне нужна большая пушка, ведь у меня капуста. Нужен аргумент, чтобы защитить свое искусство, свой дом и бизнес, свой образ мыслей. Я щедрый мистер, кто хочет выстрел, а?
This feels something straight off a new metal album from the year 2003. But that's okay, right? We're in 2025, it's cool again.
На районе нету плана, ведь он никогда не сбудется. Кидаю чипсы в урну, меня воспитала улица. Мы лед у майора на погоне. Респектос моему папе, что не надевал гондоны. Что я знал о джанке? Чистая правда. Вход в пустоту, выход сквозь сувенирную лавку. Я убил себя сам, чтоб родиться как автор. Никто из нас не стал космонавтом. Употребление наркотических средств, психотропных веществ причиняет вред, незаконный оборот. В хип-хопе ведь не важно содержание. Это мясо с кровью, а не просто недожарено. Живу ради момента, где я вышел и все замерли.
Like, this is a sound that we don't really hear anymore in the rap and hip-hop scene, because it is a very, very, like, it's a It's 20 years old at this point in time, and even if the nu metal sound has kind of come back and is kind of cool again, the rap, hip-hop, other side of the coin has not swung back in that direction. So, although maybe it will soon enough, who knows. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was not expecting this. It kind of came out of left field for me, so I had a good time with it. That is the album Время, колокольчиков, and the artist is Booker. And up next, we have another... the rap releases too are in no particular order. There's not one I think that's better than the other. I'm just, again, using this as a transition. Here we have the artist RAE, and the album is GONKI. Very young artist. She blew up earlier this year with a track with Очищение. I'm saying his name right? Очищение. No, it is right, yeah. And you can see, right, 17.6 million listens or million spins. It got a lot of traction. The rap community seems to hate her. And while this isn't necessarily my thing, it's that sort of I don't want to say girl rap, but you know, like the Nicki Minaj or the Megan Thee Stallion. That type of rap. Heavy emphasis on the street racing community in St. Petersburg. But there's a lot of pop sensibility in this too, which I guess tends to be the kind of the case with Ice Spice as well, right? Those types of artists in the States. If you only heard the first track, realistically too, you probably would think this is a pop album with a dose of hip-hop. But that honestly changes immediately on the second track here. The second full track, Victory Lap, is just a thing. There are also moments of that pop, hip-hop, R&B sound as well here. This is not necessarily my favorite style, but there aren't that many female artists in the sort of rap and hip-hop community here in Russia. What's the gonna say Shalava, but I won't say Shalava. The one who is currently in Gosduma, за деньги, да. God, who is that? Instasamka. Yeah, Jesus Christ, shoot me in the face. The majority of the sort of female end of the rap and hip hop spectrum here is absolutely продажный, just a fucking bunch of sellouts. And so the fact that there is a younger artist, I don't think she deserves the hate that she's getting. I think there is something here to be enjoyed, especially, and I think if you like this sound, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And it's pretty good. So this is the first one that feels very, very pop oriented. It's absolutely a pop song, but feels like, again, a very like early 2000s. the type of sound that was on the kind of like urban pop stations back in the early 2000s.
Пойми меня правильно, оденься прилично, познакомлю тебя с папой. Захвати на сотики все мои карты, не путай. ОПГ, ромашка, не манда. Я все сказала, сейчас им нечего сказать.
Не могу оставить в покое мать. Наваливаю плотно, как набитый дерьма. Красивенько, верю им, как верю телкам, что летаю в Дубай. Суперсоник, материю вайф. Покажи, как ты меня любишь, на весь район спальный. Я могу.
So she's definitely got bars. Pretty straightforward. Nothing there lyrically that's exceptionally deep, but at the same time, it's good in terms of just like overall skill, and in terms of musical sound and overall product, it's a very good album. It is one of those albums that it feels like it is on the edge between rap and hip hop and then pop music, right? It feels like depending on the track, or even depending on which section of a track that you are currently on, it could be interpreted as such. So that is the album GONKI, which means like races. And the artist is Sky RAE, which you're supposed to read together. Slitna, which means Skare, which I'm pretty sure means like quickly or faster, right? Skare. I don't know. I'm sure it sounded clever to her. It's kind of whatever. But that's it for rap and hip hop. Moving on, we are coming into pop and indie, the final category here. And then at the very end, I am going to check out the song that has been requested, or that was requested at the very beginning. So first up, though, we have the album Алмазы, which is Diamonds, and by the artist Сюзанна. This is alternative indie pop. It's got hints of electronic music woven throughout, stylistically and sonically. It's that type of smoky voiced indie pop artist, a little bit like Bats for Lashes, but there is more of a playful aspect to it. And I mentioned Santa Gold last week, and there are moments on this album that remind me a lot like of Santa Gold as well. It's actually good. It's a very odd album. It's almost, as far as I understand, Suzanna a year ago, 2 years ago, was more experimental, if you will, a little bit more off the wall. And you can hear that a little bit in the sound of this album. But if you like Bat for Lashes, I think that you'll enjoy this album. Also very good album artwork. Very like eye-catching.
Хочешь, улетай и летай, я начну сначала. Я знаю то, что всегда о тебе не знала. Я уверен в том, что всегда подозревала. Лучше бы не знать, лучше. Помечтай 5 минут перед сном, как лежим мы вдвоем на
Like, there's a lot of this where it feels like the song is almost off kilter a little bit. But that's done intentionally, right? It's not a flaw, it's a feature of the track. So
Нет, не трогай, не вздумай потом. Наша встреча совсем о другом, о том, как сладко не быть вдвоем.
got a little bit of the darker sound here as well.
Ты в моем сердце, но не дыри глазам. Тебя я помню по рубцам. Ты сам живая рана, от тебя не деться. Ты там, ты в голове червем и знаешь сам, что я прислушаюсь к твоим шагам. Я не уверена вовсе, но эти слезы знаю. Я не уверена,
But there are sort of more traditional indie tracks here as well too. Specifically this one, the final one is also like this as well. So if you're looking for something in the indie pop category, it's a little bit, like I said, off-kilter, a little bit more experimental, if you will. I think this is going to be a nice fit. That's the artist Sюзанна, and the album is Алмазы. We reached the tab limit. Okay, we are on to the album Коробка, из-под, осени. And this is the artist DenDerty. For those of you familiar with Russian music of the last decade or so, the description juice pop will make perfect sense. For those of you not, this is just a mix of electro pop. Over the last, I feel like this year for sure, there's been a lot of the dark female fronted electro pop, and it's the male version of that. That's kind of what juice is, but there are more of the lighter pop sensibilities in that sound. I hope that makes sense, but you'll probably hear that when I play it here. And that is how the first half of this album is, which is already good, but in the back half, and at moments throughout the front half as well, there are elements closer to the Russian artist Delphin, which is alt rock that kind of flirts with indie rock at times. This is just a very nice, very good indie rock album that is heavier and darker than, again, sound-wise, than a lot of the releases this album, in terms of just like electric guitars and stuff like that. But
Кто же тебя трогал до меня, что внутри все черное в угле? Я тебя целую, ты молчишь, глотаю дым из твоей груди. Кто же тебя трогал до меня, что внутри все черное в угле? Я тебя целую, ты молчишь, глотаю дым из твоей груди. Не хватило тепла, все, что я тебе отдал, как цветок увидал, бесполезно у окна. Мне не жалко ни дня, буду пробовать еще.
if you know me and you went to school with me, then you might understand this reference. It looks a little bit like Miller with long hair. Here's that sort of lighter, dark electro pop. The thing is, this is a really good album still, but we've had so much really good indie music so far, just this month alone, and then at the end of October as well, that this kind of gets lost a little bit, and that in comparison to some of the stuff that has come before, it's different. It's different, to be sure. It's its own thing, but like, I would still willingly listen to this album again, right? I would knowingly put it on. the heavier sound there. Again, just in the instrumentation specifically. Get the idea. It's a very good indie album. There is no doubt about that. And again, if this had come out in like June or July, it probably would have been one of the top picks of the week. As it is still a very, very good album. There is no doubt about it. It is still realistically one of the top picks of the week. It is the album Коробка, из-под, осени, and the artist is DenDerty. But the next two are just really good. Now, this one could realistically have been the top pick of the week if it had been a full length. And just look at the album artwork. Okay, I'm just going to quote what the artist had to say about this. Our new album is called Deer. Just as in a real deer, in the album is awkwardness, shortcomings, but there is its own beauty. On the cover is the fawn. Her name is Luna, which means moon. She lives on a farm in the Moscow region. The album has two guests, Saluki and the Sirotkinsky Monastery Youth Choir. The sound is breakbeat, guitar, and hopecore. That's how they describe their little EP here. The name of the EP is Олень, which means deer. The artist is Сироткин. I saw this group described as the main indie melancholics of the Russian scene, which feels pretty accurate. I do like the description that the group gave, hopecore. I think it's a great description of the sound that I associate with kind of Bon Iver's reinvention on the albums that followed the debut. I also saw the 1975 mentioned as a sound when discussing this release. There are great arrangements that still make the tracks here feel very bare and vulnerable, but the sound is very upbeat and laced throughout just this sort of like hope and yearning. It's just really, really good indie release.
Сколько мне было, когда я узнала, лужа бензина теплее одеяла. Как отбежать во все стороны сразу? Дружба и жалость, и звезды, и страсть. Что там осталось закрыто?
I don't know what's happening in the indie scene right now. In the States, in the West, but I feel like it's kind of moved away from this sound, and so at the very least it's kind of being time capsuled here, but also slowly evolving, and this is great. Like, you're hearing this, right? Just good. It's just very good. Like, you want to feel a little sad while listening to it, but the music's so upbeat that you can't. That's where that yearning sound comes in. And I love the album artwork. How can you not love that? Beautiful indie EP. And you can tell it's good because I don't even pay attention to the lyrics right now, right? I think my Russian's not so good where if I don't actually pay attention to what's being said, I just automatically understand, right? Especially if I'm speaking English at the same time. But even if I just hear the intonation of the singer, the delivery, everything of that mixed together with the instrumentation, the entire package, even if I don't understand what's going on, is still so good. Wait. I feel like the tracks with the guest vocalists are also good, but prefer them slightly less. The youth choir on the final track is quite nice, but the group by itself, I don't want to stop this song to talk, give the information about the album. So this is the group Sirotkin, and the EP is Олень. Very, very good. In fact, could very well have been the top pick of the week if it had pushed itself a little harder. Another few tracks, turned itself into an album. But as it is an EP, and full-length albums do get the preferential treatment. So we're going to move on to another release, the final release, which is equally as good, probably better in its own way, and from an artist who is just as deserving of it. This is Natural, that's how you pronounce it, and the album is Ask Nature, nttrl. Okay. This is an artist who I made a video last year about releases in the first quarter, as I did this year, and then never followed up on, but that's okay. I've got the final end of the year thing coming. And last year she put out an EP, which I guess I considered to be an album back then because I think it had like 7 tracks on it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This is her first actual LP. And I think with this release, I am actually going to, at the end of the year, going to need to create a sub-category of releases for dark electropop with female vocals. This is just another really, really good release in that sub-category, if you will. Tracks kind of work in any context here in terms of just whatever mood you happen to be in. Music's good for a party, has a lot of groove and rhythm to it, but if you want to throw it on with some headphones, this is deep music in the sense that there are many, many layers to the tracks that if you actually kind of close your eyes and dive into musically what is happening on the tracks, there is a lot to unpack. It is one of those albums that if you listen to it multiple times, you're going to begin to, it's like a matryoshka, right? One of those nesting dolls, the classic Russian nesting dolls, just an onion, which is the matryoshka is what people use to describe Russia. I prefer an onion because the more you peel it back, the more it makes you cry. But anyway, this is an album that the more you peel it back to, the more there is, like, there's just layer after layer after layer to this sound. Yes, you can dive into it. You can melt into it. It's really good music. This is a really great Russian artist. Like I said, last year I kind of discovered her. This is an artist that I think deserves a lot more credit and a much larger following than she has. And I do hope that she, because I don't like, what do we have here? 62,000, right? Very limited. So hopefully that does change in the near future. And this is an album that I think could kind of attract new listeners. The only critique I really have of this album is the artwork could have been different. Font, the image does not really stick out very well in the overall scheme of things. I am actually kind of dead serious when I said that come the end of the year, I'm probably just gonna, like, when I give a roundup of all the music and sort of my top picks in various categories, I'm probably just gonna create like a subcategory of this dark electro-pop female vocalist category, because there have been at least 5 such albums so far this year. So it's, I talked about Soft Blade last week, and I feel like this is the yin to the yang of Soft Blade, right? Where Soft Blade is very kind of, not very, but it's more positive and upbeat. This is darker and more brooding, but it has a lot of the same energy. So yeah, again, pop music, electro music, I don't know. I'm putting it in the pop category this week. Like I said, come the end of the year, it will probably be its own subcategory. But I do think this is in terms of full-length releases this week, this is probably the best one. The one that, like I said, fits kind of any mood, but is, I don't know, it kind of works in any and all situations. It's very superficial in a way if you just want to throw it on and not pay attention, but if you do want to give it the time and the energy, it will reward you with exploring it and digging into it a little bit deeper. So this is the album Ask Nature, and the artist nttrl, pronounced natural. That's the top pick of the week. There you have it. Now, there has been a request, so we are going to get to that. I am supposed to be looking for a track. Marmelade. Okay. Let's check this out. This is Mackenzie in the chat asked me to give this a listen to. This is from February of this year. Jewess with the artist, I believe, or maybe this is production, Kinoteatr Ashkhabad. Let's give this a listen here.
Конечно, я не могу быть постоянно с тобою рядом, ведь я живу за МКАДом, чтобы не ездить далеко за кладом. У нас здесь в лесопарке много мармелада, пиноколады и прочая хуйня. На столе лежит мелочь, я ее положу в карман, чтобы завтра купить пуха на рынке. Мой хуй в твоей дырке в очередной раз. Перед нашей встречей я сделал напас плотный, а я уже не модный по современным тенденциям. Но твоя талия как трапеция в геометрической прогрессии. Ты вытащила меня из депрессии, а снова насрал в штаны. Увы, нам не хватило мармелада, нужно догнаться, стагнация. Во время еды кальций в пространстве я. Малышка, только не кусайся, не заправляйся спайсом. Есть один Майк, и это не Майк Тайсон. Айс, 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 бэби, я буду тебя любить. Только послушай группу «Контейнер», все охуенно. Тебе не надо резать вены, давай немного по-другому снимем напряжение. Следы на шее, твое решение хуевое по отношению ко мне. Это не здорово, залипли в мониторы мы, я заварю.
So what I will say right off the bat is backing track, very solid. I do feel like the drums are a little bit heavy. With regards to the lyricism here thus far, which we're basically like 75% of the way through. She's got some good lines. I will say that. I do feel like her delivery is, and this is something that I've noticed a lot with Russian rappers, and I'm sure it happens quite a bit too with English language rappers as well. I just don't listen to them as much anymore. So maybe it's something, maybe this is like the new thing over the last few years, but it feels at times like the text was written and then put over the top of the beat. And so they don't always line up in the way that they should. Sometimes that can be okay. Sometimes that can be good. There are moments on this track where it felt a little bit, or it has felt a little bit like it just was kind of, this was the track, this is we'll do it. Like just there.
Лучше не подходи, не надо. Ведь так хотели мы немного мармелада. Много мармелада, пиноколада и прочая хуйня. На столе лежит мелочь, я ее положу в карман, чтобы завтра купить пуха на рынке. Мой хуй в твоей дырке в очередной раз. Перед нашей встречей я сделал напас плотный, а я уже не модный по современным тенденциям. Но твоя талия как трапеция в геометрической прогрессии. Ты вытащила меня из депрессии, я снова насрал в штаны. Увы, нам не хватило мармелада.
Also, like, hold up. I just want to write, like, take that back.
Ты вытащила меня из депрессии, я снова насрал в штаны. Увы.
Ты вытащила меня из депрессии, я снова насрал в штаны, увы. Is there something to that line? Like, you pulled me out of depression, I again shit my pants, oops. Maybe there's something there that I don't get. Maybe I'm not fully looking at it the right way, but lyrically here too, it rhymes, it works. I just lyrically don't see the full picture here, right? Like, I don't see... It's one of those things where when it comes, for me personally, with rap and hip-hop, there's got to be either storytelling or just good wordplay, right? And if you're just rapping and stringing lines and stuff together because they just kind of fit and they rhyme and they connect with each other, then that's okay, but it's not like super interesting to listen to. Again, if you don't understand the lyrics, then you can probably get by okay with this. But I'm not going to lie, Mackenzie, if you're watching this still or if you watch this in the future, there are a lot of things with this track that I'm just like, a lot of how the syllables line up with the beats and how the text actually fits into the context of the bars does not work for me. Lyrically, this feels at times kind of awkward and stilted and just like, and just kind of not great. So, yeah. Ultimately, I think I'm not like a huge fan of this. I don't know much about this artist, but I don't know. This is not necessarily I probably would pass on this. So if you like it, good for you. And I'm always open to hearing new suggestions, but yeah, like I said, this is not really doing it for me. So can we transition? Okay, there we go. Back to there. Okay, so we finished with something a little bit different. I also have gone, I guess, a little bit longer than I figured I would this evening, but that's okay. We are now basically done with November. Tomorrow is Friday, so there is still 1 week left of the month. And that means that next week, even though we will be in December, I will still be talking about November music. End of story. If you're watching or when you watch in the future, Husky is going to be dropping his album tomorrow or in about like 30 minutes at this point in time. And that will probably be the big release of the week. And then, yeah, I don't know. I've been talking about this for a while. I am very curious to see what happens with music releases come December. Will they drop off? Will things kind of quiet down? Or will they continue at the rate that they have been for the next few weeks? But yeah, anyway, we'll wrap it up. Hopefully there was something good or interesting there. I'm gonna, I guess, get ready for bed because that's about the time it is. I'll be back next Thursday, 10 p.m. Moscow time, to do more music. I'll be back on Sunday and next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Moscow time to talk about the news. So until then, if you're in the States, happy Thanksgiving once again. If not, then just enjoy the rest of your evening or afternoon, wherever you happen to be. Y'all take care of yourselves. I will see you when I see you. And until then,